You're listening to Crushing Club Marketing, a podcast for progressive club leaders ready to increase their club's revenue. The time for change begins right now. If you've been trying to get your team engaged in your club social media and wondering how to get that done, Chris Trittabaugh, the superintendent at Hazeltine National Golf Club, has some ideas for you. He's followed on Twitter and Instagram, not only by turf experts, but by golf leaders and journalists around the world. He's with us to share his tips and best practices for club social media. And thanks for listening to Crushing Club Marketing. I'm Ed Heil. Today's guest is Chris Trittabaugh, the superintendent at Hazeltine National Golf Club. And you know what? We're talking social media today. Now, I know you're going, what? A superintendent is a social media expert? And I'm saying yes, and here's why. Chris actually started in social media in 2009, which in the golf industry and in the club industry, that makes him a pioneer. And even in the marketing world, Chris is an early adopter. He has more than 9,400 followers on Twitter, and his followers include national golf writers like Matt Janella and Bradley S. Klein. Also following him are the European Ryder Cup team, PGA Tour golfers like John Daly, and also superintendents around the world. So listen, if your club is active, or if you're thinking about trying to become more active in social media, I think you're going to find this conversation helpful. Chris will show us and show you how your team can help raise the profile of your club and increase member engagement just by following best practices in social media, and how to avoid those self-serving promotional posts that so often that we see as people using social media, and they drive us nuts. But when it comes to us posting, it's very difficult. And Chris has found a nice balance between, actually, I wouldn't even say promotional, but personal stuff as well as club-related social posts. So, Chris Trittabaugh, with that, thanks so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks, Ed, for having me.
So as we speak, it's January, and in Minnesota, where you're located, it's the dead of winter. The course is closed. What does a superintendent do at this time of year?
You have to be so on during the season. You're taking care of this living entity in a golf course. I think sometimes golfers might forget that. They come out and they play the course and they see it as this playing surface, which it is. And sometimes I think it can be forgotten that thing is a living, breathing entity that needs constant attention, almost like a child. You're always having to pay attention to that, paying attention to what the weather is going to do, how that might impact the course, how that impacts what you're going to do on any particular day. And that's, from the time that we open, or even before that, that's a constant sort of thought process, whether I'm at work or whether I'm at home, or, sort of from the moment I wake up in the morning, those sort of thoughts are going through my head. And so that's pretty constant during the season. So in the winter, when you don't have that concern, you don't have that every minute sort of need to think about managing things and managing this living thing. I kind of shut it off. And, I just finished 12 years as a superintendent, and I think you get better at that. I've gotten better at that every year. You still have responsibilities. There's, some business side of stuff. There's budgeting, and there's that sort of thing that, I'm responsible for. And certainly you have staff. We have staff members that are full-time during the season, and you're paying attention to that sort of thing and working with them. And then you're paying attention to the golf course a little bit. Like right now, we just had, everybody in Minnesota at least will know that we had this really kind of weather oddity just after Christmas, and that we got snow. And then right on top of that, we got a lot of rain. And so we've got a lot of ice on the golf course right now, which there's not a lot we can do about it, but you have to think about it and pay attention to, what's happening and be considerate of, how that could impact things as you get towards the spring. So there's some thought that goes into it. But I also do a lot of speaking. I go to different associations, state, local, national associations around the country, and go and talk about turfgrass management, leadership, culture building, that sort of thing. I do some social media talks too, and how to, much like this talk is going to be, and how to use social media to impact your job.
And that's a great segue into today's conversation. So, superintendent for 12 years.
Yeah.
Let's start with this. At what point did you become active in social media?
So I can remember almost to the day when that started for me. It was in June of 2009, and it was right around the time that the U.S. Open was going on. So it was sometime June, the week of Father's Day in 2009.
And what inspired you?
Yeah, my sister got me. I was sort of aware of social media and certainly had a small awareness of Twitter. That was the way that I got started. And my sister said, you should think about using Twitter to, keep your membership informed about what's going on at the golf course. And I very much remember, so she's in marketing and does content management for a living. So she's really into that and has been for a long time. And I remember her, okay, I'm going to start this account. So I set up the account, and I remember sitting there sort of like you kind of wandering around like blindfolded, like what the heck do I do with this? And how do I use this? And I can still remember a few things that I, maybe first tweets that I had. If you went back and looked at this, you could probably find them. And I remember sort of not knowing what to do. Do I take a picture of something cool? And do I tell people who's listening? Is anybody paying attention? And so it started like that. It probably starts like that for a lot of people, and not really knowing what to do with it or who your audience is or who you're talking to. But slowly but surely, what began to happen is that there started to become this community of superintendents who were using Twitter and for similar reasons and had similar feelings in that I'm not really sure how to use this.
Right.
And for me, the strange thing is that I intended to have it be something that I informed the membership about and kept people informed about what was happening with the course. And what it became more for me, at least initially, was a way to communicate with colleagues. And now we fast forward almost 10 years. It's both. Here at Hazeltine, I have a lot of members who follow what we do. And certainly if I put something on to update people about the course, not everybody sees it, but a good enough chunk of people see it that, it is keeping people informed in that regard. And then there's the other aspect, which is communicating with colleagues and learning about what we do as superintendents and trying to get better at that. So there's two definite ways in which I use it at this point. And you have to mesh those together too. You have to keep in mind that it's not separated. If I'm communicating with colleagues, members at Hazeltine will see that, and vice versa. So
right.
Keep that in mind.
And the other thing that, and for you listening, just to give you I mentioned this in the introduction, but Chris has over 9,400 followers. So, I mean, you're coming up to 10,000 followers. And the other thing is that you have journalists who follow you. Matt Janella, who, for anyone who's follows the golf industry, from a PR perspective, I can tell you this because we used to do a lot of PR in the golf world, and to get Matt Janella's attention from a PR perspective is very difficult. So there's that third prong as well, which is sort of the PR part of it for you and for Hazeltine, which leads me to the next question: is how does this benefit the club from an awareness perspective? And a lot of the people who listen to our podcast are marketers or general managers, and they might think, geez, we just started doing social media, or more, what we hear more often, especially with more, I would say more exclusive clubs, but clubs that aren't as inclined to get into social media, they go, why would we want to do that? Mm-hmm. How has the work that you've done with your own personal account, do you think, how has that benefited Hazeltine National?
I think the exposure to, like you said, it's like this three-pronged exposure. It's the exposure to my side of the industry, to people who do what I do, and that aspect. There's exposure to our membership, and then there's exposure to sort of some golf media. And you say, 9,400 followers, which if you're thinking about the world of entertainment, that's like pinprick of a,
Sure.
an amount of people. But in the golf business, I think that's, especially for a superintendent, I think that is a pretty good amount of people. And, you have to consider that, if you think about a town or a city of 10,000 people, that's a lot of people. And so that's what you have that paying attention to what you're doing. And then, of course, the way social media works, that extends out and beyond that. So, I think it's just exposure to what we're doing at the club in a good way. And that's the key for me, is to try to keep that positive. I certainly don't talk. I try not to talk about negative things that are happening here, or certainly not say negative things about other places or clubs. I have to keep that in mind.
For sure.
I think that's very, very important. With our status as a host of major championships, and having the Ryder Cup, and there's a lot of sensitivity around that sort of thing happening, and you have to be aware of how that will be how that will be perceived by the outside world.
Yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead.
And I think, but if you do that all right, and you provide this exposure of what's happening on the golf course, and especially, I'll use the Ryder Cup as an example. As we prepared for that and got ready to host that, taking pictures of kind of behind the scenes. I always talk about the field of play. If you follow any kind of sports entity, they will often tweet pictures of the field of play in whatever sport it is.
For sure.
And, that people love that, and it's a cool look. And, that's sort of my part of, that's my responsibility here at the club, is the field of play. So, I feel like I'm always sort of giving people a window into, what is the field of play at Hazeltine, whether that be for the Ryder Cup or whether it be just for day-to-day golf or a membership. So.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the membership engagement. Did you, when you first started tweeting, this is going back, you were a, relatively early adopter, I would say, in the marketing world. You go back to 2009, and that's right around when I started tweeting as well. And for the club industry, that tends to, I think it's fair to say, lag in marketing trends for sure. When you first started, did you anticipate your membership being as interested as they are? Because as a follower of you on Twitter, and as a golfer, I love to see, and I can, maybe not as much as you, but nerd out a little bit on course and course setup, course. You talk about grass, a turf, I should say, as you would say. So, how has the membership reacted, and is it different than what you thought might happen in the beginning?
Well, I think it's sort of two pieces, and it's my time when I was at Northland Country Club in Duluth when I started this. And initially, I thought that would be the reason that I would use it, as I mentioned earlier, that I would use it to keep membership informed, and that would be the number one manner. And even at the time that I started, I thought that might be the only manner that I was using, the only reason that I was using, social media or Twitter specifically. And it really turned out to be not the case. Like I said, it ended up being more of a conversation with colleagues than anything.
Right.
Then when I left Northland, I came to Hazeltine. I think that, Hazeltine's got a really progressive membership, and not to say that other clubs don't, but I think that this one is maybe more so a little bit in that, they're young. They like to do new things. They play a lot of golf. This place plays golf like crazy, and they have so many good players, which is really one of the most exciting things about my job. But I think that, so I come on board as superintendent in 2013, and people want to know information. They want to know, who's this person we hired? What's he going to do for us? We've got this big event coming in 4 years. How is that going to be handled? And, they find out that, he has a Twitter account. And by that time, a lot of members, especially of the younger, I think age, are on those media. And they go, he's got a Twitter account. Great. Let's
follow him. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And, when you're new and when you come to a club and you're doing different things and new things, people want to know about that. There's, any club, when it comes to what's going on, there, you cannot possibly provide enough information for the membership. And so I think that was part of it. I was new. I had, sort of a story to tell. I had used it in the past. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, wow, cool. This guy's going to provide us with all sorts of windows into what we're doing that we never had before.
Right.
And I think that that's why it ended up being, there was an opportunity as a past user of the media, and then coming and being new and having a big event coming, all that stuff sort of combined to have people really be interested in, what was happening and what was going on.
Yeah, and just for our listeners to set a little bit of context, in who may not be familiar with Minnesota golf, Duluth is north of the Twin Cities by a couple hours, and Northland Country Club, where you were, is a Donald Ross course, very traditional, a more traditional. I mean, you know it better than I do, but a more traditional club than is Hazeltine. Is that fair to say?
I think that's fair to say.
Yeah. So when you started doing that, I mean, I would imagine when you started tweeting in 2009, it was probably one of those things which is why your CT_turf is probably better. You weren't gonna launch that as, at Northland CC or something like that.
Well, it used to be. It started out, it was NCC turf.
Ah, okay.
And then when I got the Hazeltine job, I thought, I had to have something different. I can't keep NCC turf. So that's when it became CT turf. And, the other interesting thing is when and this is the case in a lot of ways that I do my job, but especially in a social media standpoint, is when you leave one place and you it's almost like you get to restart. You get sort of a reset of, okay, this is the way that I used it before, and now this is the way I need to use it now.
For sure.
And I would say at Northland, less exposure. I'm gonna say that when I made the move to Hazeltine, I probably had like 2,000 followers, maybe, or just under 2,000 followers. And so then that slowly rose to the point where I think during the Ryder Cup, because my sister and I had a bet that during the Ryder Cup I would get to 10,000.
Get to 10,000?
I think I got just over 8,000.
Yeah.
But that's pretty good that's continued to rise since then. It's, I certainly lost some people who were following along during that event, and they're like, okay, we don't need to follow this guy anymore.
Right.
But, it's continued to grow. Anyway, you get this natural break where you change jobs and you go, okay, sort of reevaluate everything. And this happened in a lot of different ways that I did my job, but, social media was one of them.
Yeah.
And what am I going to do now? How am I going to do this now? Is it going to be different? I think maybe some of the discussions that I had with people are different now than they were before. There may not be as much sort of personal stuff on there now as I did before, but that's always sort of evolving. And you have to think about who the audience is and what people want to hear and what they should hear, based on what your role is and who you represent. And that's the other thing, is you always have to think about who you're representing.
Yeah, I want to come back and talk about some of that, because your approach is not like a marketer. For sure. And it's very different. But before we get to that, let me, what I'm interested to know is, what do members approach you about your tweets? Do you, how would you characterize the engagement that the members have around the content that you're posting today? I definitely can tell that they see what I post. Now, that is in many different ways. If it's something about the golf course, I'll have people come up and say, hey, I saw you posted this the other day. Wow, that's great. And certainly that can be there can be some tactical use of that. If I have something that I want people to see or want people to know about, that's one way that I can get it out there. I mean, there are people who follow religiously. I would guess there are people who probably get a notification when I tweet something. So, all of that has to be considered. And, it is a personal account, and I have personal interests outside of this. And sometimes I mesh those, and sometimes I do it more so than I maybe do now. I used to, I love Formula One racing. I love Manchester United and other sports entities. And I think that's part of my account is, hey, this is a window into not only what he's doing at work, but what he does away from work. But there has to be some real consideration to that, because there are people who, as I said, will come up and mention something that I posted about the golf course. Well, if they're going to see that, they're also going to see something else that I put on there. So there needs to be a consideration into how that happens. And, there needs to be a decorum. There needs to be a knowledge of the fact that you are representing the club
everybody who's there. And that's important here, given our sort of profile and our being a host for these championships, because you don't want to make yourself a lightning rod for any sort of negativity.
Oh, for sure.
And that has to be carefully considered.
Yeah. So let's do this. Let's take a quick break. And when we come back, I would love to get your tips, your insight for other, not just superintendents at other clubs, but for staff at other clubs. Because so often the clubs that are engaged in social media or who are interested in developing more of a social media presence, a lot of them don't know how to engage their team and their staff. And I would love to get your perspective on that, so we can talk a little bit about that. Plus maybe some of the best practices, what we're talking about right now. So let's take a quick break, and more to come with Chris Tritabaugh, the superintendent at Hazeltine National Golf Club.
Looking for a crash course on everything you need to know to market your club online? We've created a 30-page essential guide to digital marketing for private clubs that you don't want to miss. From optimizing your website and developing relevant content to engaging your audience through social media, this comprehensive guide will lead you through every essential step you want to be taking to effectively market your club online. Download it now at storytellermn.com/guide.
All right, welcome back. We are talking today with Chris Tritabaugh, superintendent of Hazeltine National Golf Club in Chaska, Minnesota, which was the host of the 2016 Ryder Cup, will be the host of the 2028 Ryder Cup, the first U.S. venue to host. Is it not just the first, but the first of European as well to host multiple Ryder Cups, or have there been European?
No, just the U.S.
Just US.
So the Belfry, which is kind of in the Birmingham area in the U.K., has hosted multiple Ryder Cups over there. So
Got it. Well, it's going to be exciting in 2028. We're talking about social media and the use of social media, and let's pick up that conversation, Chris. What for clubs that are let's start with clubs that are considering social media and leveraging that as an engagement tool with their members, maybe, and a way to drive awareness outside of their club, potentially for marketing purposes. Are there social media channels that you look at today and say, wow, these are the, if you were going to get involved, make sure you have an account in these social media channels, and some that maybe you'd avoid?
Yeah, well, so I have almost completely stopped. I used Facebook early. That was like the first thing that I had from a personal standpoint. And when I was at Northland, I had a page that was devoted to our turf grass management and the golf course operation. And I've almost completely stopped using that. I think it became sort of a time suck for me, and it was not being used effectively, and I didn't find a lot of value in it. So really, and that's not to say that isn't valuable to people, but that's just from my own personal standpoint, I kind of stopped using it. But I think, the things I concentrate on now are Twitter, which is my number one, and then I use Instagram. And Instagram is more so a lot of like family things. So I have sort of a personal account on there in which I post, a picture of something we're doing as a family or something at home. And then I started last year a account, same account, CT_turf for Instagram, that I use for golf course photos. And I think the stories option on there is really kind of a cool way to detail maybe a walk around the golf course in the morning and that sort of thing. So I've used it for that manner a little bit, and that's been pretty good. Those are the two that I use and have been successful in both regards, Twitter being certainly the number one.
It makes a lot of sense too. I mean, especially with as visual as your job is.
Yeah.
What do you tell other superintendents who maybe follow you or have heard about you and what you do in social media? What advice do you give to them? Because I think that if I'm a GM listening to this, I might go, hey, this is great, but how do I get people to do it? How do I, what's the benefit to them? What's the benefit to the club by having them engage? What would you say to that?
Well, you have to do it with some intent. So I think that's the number one thing is a person who wants to start an account for a club or, for a turf grass or a golf course management operation. If you just have the account and say, okay, I'm going to have this account and this is where I'm going to post things, updates on the golf course or updates from around the club. But you don't have intent to what you're doing, then you're going to probably struggle to get anybody to pay attention. And so there has to be regularity and there has to be intent. And I think that there needs to also be some personality to it as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that when people follow me and follow my Twitter account, that they probably get a pretty good look at my personality. Now, of course, it's not the same as a conversation with somebody, so that can be different. But
Mm-hmm.
I think people get a look into, they could go, hey, I think I know what this guy is mostly like,
Right.
because of the way that the things he posts and the things that he talks about and that sort of thing. And I think that that's important. And even a club, if it's not a personal sort of account, but more of a club account, I think that the club that their personality can come across in how they use their social media and how they try to get engagement both with their members and with outside entities. I think that's really important. So intent and personality to me are the two biggest things.
So when you say intent, is that kind of like a point of view, like a perspective, or when you say intent, what do you mean by that?
Well, I think you need to have some concrete ideas of what you want to post. So
Right.
if I think about Twitter and I think about what I really want to do is to post things from the golf course that people will see, whether it be sort of a beauty shot, whether it be sort of an update on a project that we're going to be doing, and whether it just be a general, video or photo of two people mowing.
Right.
I think so. You need to it's almost like like when I think about managing golf course turf grass, playing surfaces, I have 4 guiding principles that I use to think about when I'm gonna do something very concrete. This is what we want to do, what we want to accomplish, and then from there it gets more abstract, and you sort of decide how you're going to, make those 4 principles, adhere to those 4 principles. And I think that if you're going to use social media to promote your club or to promote yourself, I think you look at it in a very similar way. You have sort of these concrete principles or pillars, if you will, and then you figure out from there what are the more abstract things that I'm going to do to adhere to those principles. And that's what I mean by intent. Is if you're not going to have intention in what you're going to post and how you're going to do it, then you're probably going to lack frequency and consistency, and you're probably not going to get a lot of engagement.
Got it. So when a lot of times in marketing, we think about personas and who's that person you're trying to communicate with. Mm-hmm. When you think about some people say, we'll tell people sometimes is be as delicate with your tweets as you would if you knew your mother was reading them, right? Yeah. Is there do you have any sort of like guiding principle like that you think of, at least when you're posting? Because like you said, I mean, this is not just a reflection on you, but a reflection on Hazeltine National as well.
Yeah. So I think that, 2 ways to look at that is if somebody were to read through that, and I will put my hand up and say, I've not always been good at this. I've gotten better at this. And I think that if somebody were to go through from the very beginning and read everything that I've ever put on there, they would be like, at the beginning, man, this guy said some stuff that, you wouldn't want to say, either from a personal standpoint, brand building, or certainly not that a club would want to have this person saying about other people or that sort of thing. It's not derogatory per se, but just right. The way that you project yourself. So I do think you need to go, okay, how do I want people to view me? And do I want people to be disrespectful or feel like what I've said is disrespectful? That's certainly one thing that I would look at. I try not to be disrespectful of other people or other ideas. Now that's tough, because if you're going to, if I'm communicating with colleagues about something that they're doing or something that I'm doing or want to have a discussion about that, sometimes I think that questioning what somebody's doing, or asking a question about, what someone else is doing, or being not antagonistic of what they're doing, but being, maybe not having the same idea that they do, that can come across as disrespectful, even if it's not meant to be that way.
Sure.
And that's where you lose you don't have a voice, you just have words, and the tone doesn't come across. But, from a club standpoint, I look at it and I never want to do something on there, either personally or professionally, that sort of brings the club into question and has anybody say, boy, what is this club thinking having this person representing them?
Yeah.
And so I think that's a simple way to look at it, but I think that's an important thing to think about.
almost like, in a way, don't give people a reason to say you shouldn't be doing this. Right?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's
that's exactly it. That's
right.
a really good way to say it.
Yeah.
And, if I look back on my time here, so I've been at Hazeltine for 6 years, and like I said, having to sort of think about using these social media channels in a different way, there have been times where I've had somebody come to me. You asked the question about members coming to me and being aware of what I put on there. And there have been times where I've had people come, I can think of probably a handful of events, and say, that really wasn't, it doesn't represent us in the way that we think you should be representing us as a club, nor do we think that that's the way you want to represent yourself. And then I look at it and go, yep, you're right. Yeah. I've rarely deleted things, but I have done that as well. I've deleted things. But that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And I went through the Ryder Cup with lots of different knowledge about stuff and lots of sort of, lots of rules about what needed to go, what could go out and what couldn't go out, and what couldn't be talked about. And I made it through that without anybody sort of coming to me and saying, this is enough, you got to shut this down.
Right.
And I think that that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
Don't have somebody come and say, you can't be doing this anymore.
So let's kind of continue along this vein, because I think one of the things that we see in social media for sure at Storyteller is overly managed, overly politically correct. Not say that we would ever suggest someone be or a club be politically incorrect, but like almost overly sanitized posts that in some ways is if let's just say the Hazeltine National Facebook page or the Hazeltine National Twitter account, there should probably be a level of decorum to that fits the identity of the brand of the club, right?
Yeah.
Yet at the same time, when you engage multiple members of your team, so again, if you're a general manager or a marketer in your club and you're trying to make this more of a holistic approach to how you communicate, I think it's helpful to have people who have individual personalities who bring different perspectives, as long as they're all playing by the same rules. But how would you recommend people? I guess it's probably similar to what we're talking about, Chris. But I could just imagine someone, management going to Chris and saying, "Hey, Chris, we'd like you to start tweeting, but here's the deal. Here's what we'd like you to tweet. We'd like you to tweet things that sound like this and things that look like this." And so, in essence, they're saying, "We want you to be that extension, but do what we want you to do."
Yeah.
What's the danger in that? And this is a leading question because I think there are dangers, but I'd just love to get your perspective.
Well, I think the danger in that is if we go back a couple of questions, I mentioned personality, and I think the danger in that is that you lose the personality aspect. And I think sanitized is a good way to say it. You certainly want to have decorum in how you use it. You want to be respectful to others. I think that if you are representing a business, even representing yourself, but of course we see this doesn't take place, especially in today's day and age. You don't want to get into discussions about, there's a lot of political discussions that are right there and readily available. And, trust me, I'm tempted as much as anyone to weigh in on some of these things, but you just can't do that. So you have to have some decorum and some direction in what you're going to do, but and what you're not going to do. But I think that there is a danger in it becoming too sanitized, because if that's the case, then there's no personality, and then it's really not that interesting.
Right.
And all of a sudden people aren't, they're not going to pay attention to it.
Because it's not interesting, right? I mean, all of a sudden it's just like, that's just not interesting. You're giving me
it has to be interesting.
Right.
It has to be interesting. I mean, you have to, there has to be a variety of things that you're posting. There has to be a variety of things that you're talking about. What's interesting to my colleagues isn't necessarily interesting to my members. But there might be some crossover there. And if I can post something that's interesting to both those entities, then that's where I get that, sort of multi-directional discussion going.
Yeah. How much time do you spend, thinking about and contributing to your social media, primarily, as you said, Twitter and Instagram? Is it?
Tough to say. I think contributing, it's less than an hour a day. I don't spend a great deal of time. Like, I'm not as, because it's not a business account per se. I'm not scheduling a lot of stuff. I'm not kind of going ahead and thinking, okay, this is what I'm not scheduling out my intent, if you will. I'm not putting together a schedule for it. It's just sort of off the cuff.
Right.
And it's going around the golf course and it's taking a picture of this and thinking, wow, this would be really interesting to share with someone for this reason. It's before and after, you do a before and after sort of thing, but I don't spend a great deal of time with it. And I've really tried to get to where I'm contributing content to it and responding to content, but not wasting my time sort of scrolling through just stuff that
looking at things.
Yeah, just looking at things. I've really tried to cut back on that and done an okay job.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to, right? I mean, especially when you're posting stuff, you want to see if anyone's seen it. So there's an area that I'd like to explore, which is that social media is just part of your life. I mean, it's just, you started doing this years ago, and there's something about it for you and now, I mean, you're a thought leader. You're a thought leader in the industry. Other superintendents, other people in the golf industry follow you because they're interested in your perspective and things that you're doing. But you're not engaged in social media because someone has said, hey, Chris, you need to have a Twitter account for the club. Or, Chris, boy, it'd be great if you had a Twitter account for the club, because that can lead to how much time am I spending? Are they paying me for this? And they should be compensating me for this. And what should I be doing instead? What is this going to replace? Right? I mean, is that for people who are listening, especially maybe other superintendents, people in the services part, outside services of golf clubs, what would you say to those people that maybe have that approach? And by all means, it's their prerogative to have that approach. And sometimes, depending on the culture of the club, it's easier to have to be sort of negative about it than others. But going back to intent in a way, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think it's, there's, for me, it's an enjoyable thing to do. And it has never seemed like a burden because I think, as you said, it was never something that was imparted on me and said, okay, we need you to do this as part of your job here. I see it as part of my job. Certainly there's a personal sort of brand building aspect to it. And it's allowed me to, you said thought leader. I think it's allowed me to sort of become that within the industry. It's helped with that. It's helped bring about awareness of what we're doing and how I think about things. And so to me, it's never seemed like a burden. It's always been an enjoyable thing. And so if you are a club and you're going to have an account that's going to, be for your club and represent your club specifically, rather than the way that I do it, which is a personal account that, certainly represents the club, but represents myself as well, is you have to think about how can I have this be something that is enjoyable for the people who are going to contribute to it. And that might get into a greater discussion. I know that's not what we're talking about today, but just the how people work most effectively in their jobs, which is enjoyment. And that's a big thing for me, is make sure that people enjoy what they're doing. So if you take that into this area, if you're going to have a social media account for your club, make it be something that people can enjoy, as opposed to seeming like it's a burden for them to have to do it. Because if they enjoy it, they're gonna do it. They're gonna do more of it. They're gonna produce better content, and they're going to it's going to be more valuable.
Yeah. Let's just get your thoughts in a couple of questions, and we'll wrap up here. But what if there are 3 pieces of advice that you would give to a new superintendent, someone maybe in any aspect of the club that is thinking, boy, I should get more involved in social media, or I'd like to be more involved in social media, but I'm not really sure where to start or how to do it. What would you, and if you have more than 3 pieces, that's great too, but what would you say to them?
I think my number one piece of advice is when you're going to set it up, and I mentioned intent early, but when you set it up, have some kind of a concrete intent to what you want to accomplish. Do we want to market the club? Do we want to market events? Do we want to cover events? Do we want to market to the outside of the membership, or do we want to market sort of inwardly to our membership alone, and know what your intent is there? And then I think, the personality aspect is huge. Again, just like we talked about, make it an enjoyable thing. Make it an enjoyable thing for people to follow. Put content on there. Make sure there's going to be content on there that people are going to like to interact with. And in that regard, in order to make that happen, you have to have a person who's contributing to it, person contributing to it, who are enjoying that aspect and have some freedom to add some personality to it and to make it fun, but knowing the guidelines as well. Those to me are the two biggest recommendations I could give: are intent and personality, and bringing both of those to what you're going to do.
And maybe consistency too, right? I mean, a lot of times people,
yes,
they start
that's a good
then
one.
they lose interest,
and then they lose interest, and they've gone a month and there's been nothing on there. But I think that gets to the personality aspect. And if you make it enjoyable for the person who's going to make the contributions, then they will stay consistent with it too. Again, if it becomes a burden like we were talking about before, then they'll lose interest and it won't be as much fun for them. And then your audience will sort of go away.
You talk about making it enjoyable, and you've said that several times, and it really is the idea that the way I've always thought about social media as well, but it really is. It's not about you. It's about the people. Are you someone that's interesting enough that people would want to follow, that would want to see your posts? Is it because if all you're doing is talking about you without thinking about the enjoyment or benefit of the person who's seeing your posts, then you're not going to have very many followers.
Yeah, I would agree. When I post something, I think about, there's not a great value to me. It's what are people gonna think about this, or what are they gonna get out of it? And there's a lot of aspects as we've gone on. From connecting with industry colleagues to keeping members informed, but it's getting something out there for them to enjoy and interact with. And of course, that's going to bring some personal benefit. I'd be lying if I said that hasn't helped me a great deal. I think it helped me get the job here at Hazeltine.
Interesting.
And, it's helped to build a brand. And, a lot of the speaking engagements that I get come from people having seen something that I posted, on my social media. So awesome. All that stuff is beneficial.
Yeah.
So.
Let's talk a little bit about your blog. So you've got a couple blogs that you managed. Let's just if you'd share with our listeners what they are and who has access to them, that might be helpful as well.
Yeah. So the first one is within the Hazeltine website. So hazeltinenational.com, and then in a menu across the top, there's a turf blog, and that talks about the golf course and what we're doing on the golf course. Try to keep that updated on maybe not a weekly basis, but certainly monthly. And, with any sort of things that are going on that come up that I think the membership needs to be aware of. And then have another blog, which is more of a personal blog through the website medium.com. And my handle on there is the same as my other social media account. So @CT_turf. And on that, I write more about sort of culture, team building, leadership type things, just thoughts that I have had or a topic that comes to mind, and I feel sort of inspired to write about it. So they're usually short pieces, usually under 5-minute read, and just things that have sort of inspired me or brought me some sort of mental stimulation that I want to write about.
Yeah, more personal reflection than it is.
Yeah,
right.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
And I've done a lot of blogging over the years. That was, if I go way back to when I started, when I was at Northland, I think the blogging actually came before the social media use.
Oh, interesting.
And then social media kind of came after that. And then there's been a lot of cross promotion of that over the years too. Social media is a great way to get a blog post out to a large number of people.
Yeah. And what's interesting too about your blog is it's a great engagement, just like your social channels. It's a fabulous engagement tool for your existing members because they can read more about the course and what's happening. And it's also, there's some awareness outside of the club as well that people can plug into. Maybe even people who are considering Hazeltine National as a golf club, they can learn more about the course in a very intimate way.
Well, I think, the benefit to a club of having a turf blog is, I think that either the members, the existing members, or potential members, if you're marketing it that way, can look at that, and I would hope would look at it and see that, wow, here's a person who takes care of the golf course that really has a lot of thought and gives a lot of thought and takes particular care with how they do things. And we can see that. And I think anybody who joins a club, the number one reason probably that people would give would be, I want to join a private club because I want to play on a really great golf course and I want to do that every day. And if I think that blog offers the opportunity for us to portray how much care we put into the golf course, and both our members and any prospective members can look at that and read those pieces. And I think that they will find that, wow, this is a place that, if I want to be at a good golf course, I think I want to be here because these guys really care about what they're doing. They work really hard at it.
Yeah, and let's face it. I mean, Hazeltine National, if you're not familiar with the club, is a golf club. There's not a country club. There's no pool. There's no tennis. So for people who love golf and love the game of golf, there's no better club in Minnesota for that. And you can go really deep with Chris in that blog, which is really, really cool. So Chris, people that are interested in following you, where you've mentioned it a couple times, but let's just reiterate your social handles that they can find you on.
Yeah, so my handle for Twitter is at CT_turf, TURF. So CT, my initials, CT_turf. And that's my handle for Twitter. And that's my handle for the golf course and turf grass management account that I have on Instagram. My personal account on Instagram, if anybody's interested in that, I have some really cute girls. That's the letter.
It's your children. Let's be clear. It's your children.
Yes, my children. Yes. So I have a very cute wife.
Yeah.
My account there is C, and then my last name, Trinidad.
Chris, thanks so much for spending some time with us today.
Yeah, you got it, Ed. I'm happy to do it. It's a great subject, and I'm happy to have had the time to talk about it with you.
We look forward to more conversations with you. Thanks for taking time to listen today. Hopefully, Chris's insight and experience will help you shape your social media strategy or even give you some ideas as you launch your social media channels. Hey, if you like what we're doing here, subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Google Play, or Spotify. Until next time, keep crushing your club marketing.